When it comes to twin-stick shooters, I tend to really enjoy them. It's a set of games that I find easy to pick up and get into its mechanics. A solid group of twin-stick shooters are the ones made by 10 Tons. Neon Chrome is a solid roguelike that provided quality shooting with a good progression. They opted to make one inspired by Hotline Miami that incorporated slowdown mechanics with the added effect that you could only take one hit before you die. On the surface level, these twin-stick shooters can be brutally difficult since you don't really have a lot of wiggle room before you die, but they can also create a nice flow to them as you start to learn the enemies and how to tackle the situations. It is a nice mix of planning and a lot of reacting. God's Trigger is a new twin-stick shooter that aims to provide their own mark on this type. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for God's Trigger. God's Trigger provides you with two different characters to play as. You can play as Judy, who has access to her chain for long but narrow melee attacks. Her first ability is that she can mind control enemies, which can help to clear a larger room and make it easier for you to enter. Harry is the other character, and he is armed with a sword, which has a short reach but a wide attack area. His attacks are good for killing more than one enemy at once. His first special ability is the ability to turn invisible. This is useful for getting a better angle on the next room. When in single player, you can swap between the two of them as you want. You will want to do this for the situations that call for you to use Harry's dash ability to break down walls and Judy's ability to be able to teleport through iron bars. Being able to switch between the two of them on the fly gives some nice options to the player and helps to keep the action fresh. While in the levels, you'll want to attack all the boxes and breakable objects you can to get bonus items like ammo, energy, or even combo points. Energy is earned through killing enemies, and it can be used for your special abilities. Energy is used to give you a sort of mark and execute maneuver where you can mark which enemies you want to attack and in what order, and then when you enter a room and hit the fire button, your character will target those enemies. It is sort of like a top-down version of the same feature used within the recent Splinter Cell games. One thing to note is that this move is fun to pull off, but it wasn't something that I used throughout my entire experience. Stealth is another option for these combat encounters, and it has its own things to consider. If you get behind an enemy before they are alerted, you can kill them in one hit. A stealth kill results in the enemy's body disappearing, where regular kills will leave bodies and cause enemies to come in and investigate. Along with this, you can earn more energy for stealth kills. The downside is that enemies that are killed with a stealth kill do not drop the weapons that they are holding, so you need to consider what you want more in a certain situation. And it is very fun to clear an entire room using stealth. While stealth usually is an option, most of the combat will be you reacting to enemies. And with this, you have the attacks I mentioned before, but along with that, you can pick up additional items throughout the levels. You will get pistols, SMGs, shotguns, along with some special weapons, like one that shoots this force push ability, a blunderbuss, and a Tesla gun. The guns are fun, as many of them give you a nice range on your enemies, and the shotguns are great for taking out more than one. The special items can make a few of the enemy rooms a bit easier for you when you have them. One item that I really enjoyed was the shield that you get later in the game, as when you're facing the enemies you can take a few hits and still attack them without dying. There are experience points to earn when you defeat enemies and find hidden experience point caches throughout the levels. Experience points will allow you to improve your base attacks along with selecting different special abilities and upgrading them. Also, I do want to warn you that God's Trigger is really tough and you can only take one hit before you die, and you're going to die a lot. There's both a sense of satisfaction and frustration with how hard this game is. Since you can only take one hit, there is this continued sense of vulnerability to the player. You cannot take several shots before you go down, but at the same time, you have a lot of power yourself. The game flirts with keeping you at a level where you feel vulnerable, while also providing you with plenty of opportunities to feel empowered. And this sort of creates a state of flow within the game that is unique to these types of games that do it well. It's a nice mix of reacting to new threats and then planning your attacks with each room. And with all of this, it creates an entertaining combat loop. But there is frustration that comes along with it, which I think for some people that this is not going to be their type of game because of personal preference. The levels sort of act like combat puzzles where you need to try to think on the fly and use what equipment you have along with your abilities. In many situations, the game rewards you for thinking about how you want to proceed, and as you have a lot of options for this, there's a lot of variability and customization to the combat. Most of the levels require you to take down enemies within each room. While the game is hard, it does provide generous checkpoints with each of the encounters. There are a few spots where I felt like better checkpoints could have been done, especially in Chapter 4, but for the most part, they're pretty good. God's Trigger will try to also change up the action by providing these sort of set-piece moments to really shift the gameplay. One in particular that I really enjoyed was the Gatling gun section. This was a simple section and I enjoyed it. The other means that the game tries to change up the action are through dodging traps. Also with this, you really need to pay attention to your timing because they will take you out pretty quickly. The boss fights are another way that the game tries to have you consider the action differently. In many of these boss fights, you can't really hit them until they really provide an opening for you, so it's a lot of dodging their attacks and then finding that appropriate opening to be able to attack them. God's Trigger does provide a campaign mode along with an arcade mode. The arcade mode acts like an instant action mode. You can pick from a handful of levels and you will need to defeat a set amount of enemies. To help the replay value of this are that the enemy positions will change each time you do them. The arcade levels can be really tough since you do not have checkpoints and require you to defeat all the enemies to succeed. This means that each time you do one of these levels, you really need to reassess the enemies and determine how to best attack. I played a big portion of the game in single player and had an enjoyable time, especially with the added ability to be able to switch my character on the fly. But I do think this game is more enjoyable in the provided local co-op. Co-op helps to change up the action for the better. While in co-op, you have the ability to revive your teammate, but you can't revive them all you want. If you run out of the needed items to be able to revive, then it's game over. The added effect to be able to revive each other is great, but it's something you cannot waste because it will make the later parts of the level tougher. What I did enjoy with co-op was how I could coordinate with my partner to take down rooms. Successful stealth encounters and clearing rooms are great, especially when you try to figure out how to divide and conquer. The areas that really stood out to me were the situations where you are regulated to specific roles and need to help each other out. There's one memorable level where Judy is a sniper and Harry is on the ground doing the objectives. Along with that, some of the puzzle areas sort of act like this as well, where you need to think about each other's powers. These types of situations really highlights the fun that can be had in co-op, and it's the preferred way to play this game. I mostly had an enjoyable time with God's Trigger, but I did notice a few flaws that I hope get patched out. The biggest one was with how the cutscenes were. The audio and video seemed to be delayed where it would only present the lines through subtitles, and then the cutscene would sort of fix itself about halfway through. This was extremely annoying as it happened throughout the entire game. Thankfully, the story isn't really why you're going to be playing this game, but it was annoying nonetheless. Here's an example of what I'm talking about.
Not going in guns blazing didn't sit right with me. But that was our only chance to infiltrate a goddamn military base.
I do think this is something they're going to be able to easily patch out. There is a stealth only section that pops up that I wasn't the biggest fan of because it really restricts how you were previously playing the game. It did help to provide a change to the action, but it was annoying because when you got caught, the amount of enemies that would come rushing at you wasn't really anything different than what you fought before, so it really felt like the game was just forcing you to go back to a prior checkpoint instead of facing these enemies. Overall, there's a lot to enjoy here if you embrace the challenge and like twin stick shooters. Like I always say, I'm on the lookout for more games that provide offline local co-op, and I'm happy when I see it. With God's Trigger, I think it provides an even better experience with a friend. The characters have different moves and skills, and that makes co-op more enjoyable. The action is very violent and satisfying. If you're looking for a challenging twin stick shooter, then you should definitely check this one out.